I like the way this feel. Yeah. Let my soul cry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Minister. We gonna speak from the heart on this one. I'm performing lyrical funerals, no obituary. I killed your boy and brought him back to life. Pet cemetery. My anointing not based on attendance at a seminary. Scarlet witches, they attracted to the visionary. Everywhere I go, I bring the word with me, missionary. Soldier drafted in the war machine, military. Pay attention, what I'm saying to you, legendary. You got the demeanor of a front desk secretary. That mean you take the calls, but you don't make the calls. That's why you hate, cause ain't nothing fake about me at all. Now I dare you try to say that with a straight face. My delivery in tip-top great shape. I'm too advanced for you, light years, space age. No evolution for you cavemen, stone age. I'm a thoroughbred, rock solid. I came from the bottom to the top, rock climbing. I grew up in the hood, pros and cons. That's that full court pressure when the ambulance roll out the stretch. Why can't you see it's not logical? And you live diabolical. Boy, your point of view smaller than the hair follicle molecule. This for all of them that follow you, smoking all of them barbecue. When I pull up, your voice on correct itself with no auto-tune. I got a whole nother level that I can enter whenever I gotta deal with the devil. I pick a whole nother method. I hear a whole lot of yapping. They wanna see my reaction. Really out here in the community making it happen. I don't really think they understand the dilemma. They ain't looking at the man in the mirror. I can't say it any clearer. The plan is very simple. It's time to start playing in the temple. Before somebody come and put the can on your temple. Reaching like a baby with his hand for the nipple. The Grand Reaper coming with his hand on the sickle. In the van coming with a ram with the van coming get him. I am so glad that I changed up. Made it out of where I came from. Watch for the slide and the hook of the slow ball, fastball, and that change up. That ghetto lifestyle, it changed us. Go back to visit, it ain't changed much. Only difference is now the way that my brain process information. And Satan, but after my license, day one, let me say something. Only reason that I'm still alive today because God's grace is amazing. Just another raisin in the sun. Dream deferred when things occur. Now you getting served right on the curb like a lemonade stand. I just gave you the benediction, let the whole church say amen.
Peace, peace, peace. What it is, it's your brother Teotw Swain, aka the Orthodox Moor, aka the Seven Pillar Saracen. And this morning, I'm bringing a conversation to the family. It made it to my attention that Abu had made a Facebook post giving another thought experiment to what he thinks is the position of the twins in Teotw Ministries, or the End of the World Ministries with Minister Teotw and Minister Yehovah, in response to the interview they did with me on Debate Talk for You. That video was on my channel, and it's also on Debate Talk for You if you want to go check it out. I also put out a video where I basically just clipped together the part where Abu publicly had made some statements about the brothers' positions, and I clipped up the part of the interview where they responded to what he had to say. So you can get a real small, concise response to the whole thing. But I wanted to address the post that Abu made because one, he let me know that there's a whole other conversation going on between him and the brothers in the Rumble Room, if y'all are part of that. A very lively discussion at that, to say the least. But in going through that discussion and going through his post, it seems that there's an argument or a portion of the argument that the twins are making that either Abu is not hearing or he's not addressing, one of the two. And typically, in going back and forth with Abu, he's typically efficient at dealing with every argument being proposed to him. So I'm thinking he's either just not seeing it or he may not understand the depth of the argument being made. So that's no slight at Abu. However, I'm going to do my best to try to elaborate on what I think the brothers are saying and what I think Abu is not necessarily addressing, and doing such by asking Abu some questions in return and hypothetical. But before I get too much into that, I want to actually just read what Abu had put out there. And we'll just call it a day from there. Bada bing, bada bing, bada boom. There you go. Y'all can see that. Cool. So this is from his Facebook post on Abu's page on Facebook. He says, quick note on attempts to appeal to autosomal DNA to determine patrilineal descent. Suppose we have a relatively homogeneous population, which we call population X. Suppose there is a man who is not from population X, but who lives among them and marries one of the women from population X. Suppose they have a son, and their son in turn marries another woman from population X, and they in turn have a son with that pattern of marriages and the bearings of sons continuing for several more generations. Returning to that man who was not from population X, note the following. His son's DNA could easily be roughly 50% indicative of population X. His grandson's DNA could easily be roughly 75% indicative of population X. His great-grandson's DNA could easily be roughly 87% indicative of population X. His great-great-grandson's DNA could easily be roughly 93% indicative of population X. His great-great-great-grandson's DNA could easily be roughly 96% indicative of population X. In short, within 5 generations, we could have a patrilineal descendant of a man not from population X, whose DNA could easily be more than 95% in common with population X. Within 6 generations, it could be 98%. By the 7th generation, it could, however, be around 99%. Going forward further. He says, when we are talking about paternal lineages across millennia, many dozens of generations are involved. E.g., if we are trying to determine a paternal line stretching back 3,600 years, that could easily involve 180 generations. For that reason, just as one cannot determine patrilineal descent across millennia based on morphology, so too one cannot determine such based on autosomal DNA. Now, that last part there was a really strong claim. Really, really strong claim. And when I read that, I was like, wow, that's interesting, because I feel like there's that claim. Let me say this: when I was reading Abu's responses to the brothers or whatnot, I didn't see any responses to what they were talking about concerning paternity tests. And Abu, if you made one, please put it down below so I can be aware of it, because I looked and I couldn't find one, brother. So I'm looking at what you posted, and I'm assuming that this is in direct response to what they had to say, because in the interview they did with me, the brothers also mentioned the paternity testing concept. And so I'm going to touch on that here just a little bit. So paternity testing, the history and methodology thereof. I have a couple of different websites and articles I've linked that I'm gonna read from, 2 of them back to back. These are not all the same article. There'll be a figure 1 and a figure 2, but they are not from the same article. Just so we are clear, family. But it says here in the 1970s, and this article is, I'll link it down below when the video's over too. It's from nature.com. But it stipulates this: in the 1970s and 1980s, electrophoresis of various biochemical markers became widely available. With this process, proteins from a person's blood or other tissue were placed onto a gel, such as potato starch, agarose, or polyacrylamide. An electric current was then run through the gel, and different forms of isozymes of the proteins were separated by their electrical charge and or size. Differences in isozymes relate to differences in alleles that code for these proteins. Thus, the presence of certain identical isozymes in samples from both the child and his or her potential father could be used to reveal the existence of a genetic relationship between the two individuals. Figure 1, in fact, by 1974, suggested that genetic testing via electrophoresis had advanced such that this method might be used to confirm paternity rather than merely exclude a man as a child's father. So this is the figure being referred to. This is what the figure states. This test includes samples from the mother, top row, the child, middle row, and the alleged father, bottom row. The maternal marker that has been passed to the child is 6. This means that the other marker present for the child, 7, must have been inherited from the father. The alleged father matches the child since one of his markers is indeed 7, as you can see here. Mom and the child got 6, but mom does not have 7, but the child and the father have 7. Going further in the same article, today, with the advent of numerous DNA sequencing, amplification, and testing techniques, paternity testing has evolved even further than predicted. Indeed, present-day genetic testing has an accuracy rate of up to 99.99%, i.e., 9,999 out of 10,000. Of course, the exact level of accuracy depends on the number and quality of the genetic markers being considered. Here, it is important to emphasize that scientists consider only specific marker alleles rather than entire genomes when conducting paternity testing. I want that to be that should be noted real quick, right there. That there's a way that they do paternity testing where they leave out certain information that's not currently being done. I'm going to touch on that in a second. Full genome analysis would add a great deal of time and expense to the process without significantly improving the accuracy of the results. Thus, DNA-based forms of paternity testing have all but taken over earlier methods. In addition, higher throughput, better sensitivity, and automation have allowed DNA testing to be performed on even smaller and sometimes degraded DNA samples with greater speed and excellent accuracy. So to be clear, this methodology is for direct paternity testing. Like, so if I'm trying to find who my father is, etc. This is not for paternity testing over time. And so what Abu is saying is that doing autosomal testing is not a good way of finding out your paternity over time. What I heard the twins saying is that it's the best way of finding your nearest relatives now, so why would it not be a way of determining such over time? That's what I was hearing the twins saying. Hey, and Minister Teotw and Minister Yacob, if I've misunderstood you and I miss representing your position, please let me know so I can clarify publicly. So when it's talking here about it just in a regular paternity test where they don't compare the genomes, in terms of finding out paternity over defining the paternity over millennia or patrilineal lines over millennia, etc., or I'll even say tribal lines over millennia, right? You might have to do, or you're most likely going to have a different methodology than if you're going to do it immediately. You're probably going to have to include testing other parts of the genome, particularly to find out what ancient markers are going to be and what different mutations over time have been. So right now they're not testing the full genome because it doesn't matter in instant paternity testing, right? In your nearest paternity test, right? But if I'm going to go anciently with this joint, right, and find out who everyone was related to back in the day, I might have to extend the genome in terms of my testing, or extend the aspect of the genome that I actually test. And that'll get explained a little bit in the next one. All right. Oh, my fault. This was going further from the same article, the last bit. I did not have the room to link it below, but it's the same article nonetheless. Interestingly, improvements in paternity testing over the past several decades have not only led to an increase in the accuracy of test results, but also to expanded application of various testing methods. For example, as DNA technology has gotten more precise it has become possible to determine paternity using DNA from grandparents, cousins, or even saliva left on a discarded coffee cup. So they can determine paternity now from near relatives, not even directly from the father themselves, the potential father themselves. Such DNA testing is clearly an important part of criminal investigations, including forensic analysis, but it is also useful in civil courts when the paternity of a child is in question. The widespread availability of paternity tests on the web and in neighborhood drugstores is also indicative of a civil demand for this technology. However, it is important to note that such direct-to-consumer tests will not stand up in court because there is no way to prove whose samples were analyzed. Hence, direct-to-consumer testing is most often used to assist in making a decision to initiate litigation or to simply provide peace of mind in matters of questionable paternity. In broader applications, advances in paternity testing mean that people who were adopted now have more direct means to confirm their biological identity or to find their birth parents. In addition, parentage testing is often an essential tool in proving immigration status in cases of family reunification. Now, this is the other article I have, right? It stipulates this, and this I definitely wanted to read in terms of trying to break down something that the twins are saying about some of the verbiage they were using, because there's some the articles say the same thing, but there's one. This article says it's slightly different in more conjunction with what the twins were saying. The DNA fingerprinting technology, first described in 1985, has now become a powerful tool for paternity and maternity testing. It first became available for in 1988 and has since evolved. The current gold standard employs a molecular biology technique that enables exponential amplification of fragments of DNA. The procedures are simple, only requiring a small sample of bodily fluids, tissue from the child and the potential biological father. This sample is typically gathered from a blood draw or swabbing the inside of the cheek. Paternity testing based on DNA has become the most acceptable method for proof of biological relationship. Since half a person's DNA is inherited from the mother and the other half from the father's, comparison of DNA sequences can identify parentage. Sibling DNA tests can also be performed in cases of a deceased or missing parent. These sibling tests can be used to verify if two or more individuals share a common parent. The pattern of inheritance of genetic markers between siblings are different from that between a parent and child. While identical twins share 100% of the same DNA, full siblings only share roughly 50% of the DNA. Half siblings only share 25% of the DNA on average. DNA paternity testing involves collection of a DNA sample from a child and the potential father. The DNA sample may be collected using multiple methods. The most common methods are collecting a blood sample or a swab from the inside of the cheek. The DNA is fragmented using one of multiple approaches, and the fragments are run on a gel that separates them by size, creating a distinct banding pattern. Figure 2 shows all that, right? The patterns of these bands provide information about the biological relationships and as described below. So I believe this is figure 2. Yep. Figure 2, DNA profiling in paternity testing. Children inherit half their DNA from each parent and thus possess a combination of both. DNA fragments from the child should also be present in the fragments from the mother in gray. You can see that on screen there. And the father in black. You can also see that. Here, father 2 is more likely to be the biological father. There are two methods for generating DNA fragments. The first is restriction fragment length polymorphism, RFLP, that utilizes the variation in DNA sequences recognized by restriction enzymes to cut DNA in pieces. The second is polymerase, chain reaction, PCR, that takes advantage of a rapid amplification of DNA, either at unique sequences or at short tandem repeats. Now, that's the part that I wanted people to recognize there, because that's what the twins were talking about. They were talking about the short tandem repeats. They were also talking about like the polymorphisms and whatnot. And again, all that has to do with links and whatnot. And when you actually start looking at DNA, how you connect to other people, you'll start to understand where the links come in and all them type of things. But so this is showing this chart here was showing paternity between two fathers, right? And who's more likely to deal with the child or whatnot, and talking about the multiple methods is how they deal with this. But again, I want people to see here where it's talking about. Let me just read this again. The first is restriction fragment length polymorphism that utilizes the variation in DNA sequences recognized by restriction enzymes to cut DNA in pieces. The second is polymerase chain reaction that takes advantage of rapid amplification of DNA, either at unique sequences or short tandem repeats. Now, to what I understand, that's what the brothers was talking about. If I'm incorrect, please correct me, family. And you know, before I get into these questions with Abu, let me stop sharing here and let me share this here. Because when I was reading Abu's Facebook post, I started asking myself, I was like, I wonder if Abu's ever actually taken a DNA test with one of these modern companies or whatnot. Because typically when you take these DNA tests, they show you how you're connected to other people. Like they can show you who your aunts are, your uncles. If your father's taking the test, if your cousin's taking the test, they'll show you that. And so I just want to read this real quick. So this is from 23andMe. I'm reading it from here because this is one that me and the twins both took. This is one of the most common ones is the 23andMe. But this is what it says about average percentage DNA shared between relatives. So this is how they take your autosomal DNA and they can show you how you're related to other people. And this isn't an immediate thing. This isn't just paternity stuff. But this is, and again, this isn't binding in court or anything. However, but the same technology is being used. It says this: the following table summarizes both the average percent DNA shared for different types of relationships and the expected range of percent DNA shared. Notice that many relationships share the same average percent DNA and their ranges overlap. If you and a relative were to share 70% of your DNA, for example, there would be some probability that the relative is your aunt, your niece, your grandmother, your grandchild, your half-sister, or even your first cousin. The relationship 23andMe presents is the most likely relationship based on not only the amount of DNA, but also the pattern of DNA segments, your self-reported ages, and your relationships to other relatives you both have in common. But there is a great diversity in the amount of DNA shared between any two individuals with a particular relationship. To view your amount of shared DNA and compare it to this table, go to the relatives profile page and select View DNA Details in the section titled Your Genetic Relationship. To see the additional possible relationships for an individual in your family tree, click on the relative in your tree and select See Other Possible Relationships. So if you have a 23andMe, you can look at your DNA relatives and it'll show you based upon percentages how close they are to you. If you're their first, second, third cousin, if they're a grandparent, etc. If they're an uncle, if they're an aunt, if they're a mother, father, sibling, all that. But they have a basic way of how they show you this, right? So if you have 100% match, you're an identical twin. That's what the twins got, right? At 50%, they're saying parent or child, or also a sibling, right? And the range, they also have ranges over here, right? Average DNA shared and then the range. Going all the way down, 25%, you have grandparent, grandchild. You have the aunt, uncle, the niece, nephew, the half sibling. And there's a range there from 17 to 34%. First cousin, etc. Great grandparent, great grandchild, great uncle, aunt, great nephew, niece, etc. 12.5%. The range is 4 to 23%. First cousin once removed, half first cousin, 6.25%. The range is 2% to 11.5%. On and on and on and on. I can finish it off. Second cousin, 3.13%. And the range is 2 to 6%. Second cousin once removed, half second cousin, and the half second cousin, right? 1.5%. You have 0.6% to a 2.5% range. Third cousin, 0.78, with a range of 0% to 2.2%. Fourth cousin, 0.2%, with a range of 0 to 0.8%. And fifth cousin to distant cousin, 0.05% with a variable, right? Now, again, this is all modern stuff, right? And again, what they're doing is they're checking the lengths of certain codes and certain sequences in the DNA, on top of other things, right? And in doing so, they're able to show you relations and whatnot. Now, again, this is an immediate concept. Now, I can hear it like Abu's intelligent, right? So he's probably going to say like, okay, now I want to talk about like a paternal line over time, though. Got you. Here's the interesting thing about all that, and this is where we get into my questions. If you're talking about just one family line or just one haplogroup, right? So let's say Abraham had the EM34 haplogroup. That's the one that my uncle has. That's one of the haplogroups that's actually being designated as the potential haplogroup for Abraham, right? Because and this is the part where it gets interesting and sticky, family, because people who say they're descended from the Prophet Muhammad or Ishmael say that they have it, or they're proved to have it, and people the Kohens who descend from some of the Kohens who descend from that say they descend from Jacob also have the EM34 marker. So because both have it, it's more likely that they have the marker from Abraham. Now this is where it gets sticky, where I got to start asking my questions. So let me so if Ishmael and Isaac can have the same paternal haplogroup, well, how do you determine if someone's Israel? And this is where the brothers are having where they're talking about getting more specific with the autosomal, because you got to see who matches. And I hear what Abu is saying in terms about if somebody over 7 generations they have this particular mixing pattern. Well, how do you make the difference? How do you tell? Well, again, this is also what the brothers are talking about. And to be clear, as a caveat and a disclaimer, there's aspects of the haplogroups that I think that the Bible backs. I do believe that let me say it like this. There's aspects of, I believe that the Bible, through the seed of the father and the seed of the mother, do back the concept of genetic information maternally and paternally. However, I also do believe the Bible backs the concept of an autosomal concept to the DNA. And I think we can find this in Revelation, for instance, where you find 144,000 people needing to be sealed by the Most High. They're not being called by their lineage; they're being sealed by lineage. It's a whole other concept. And I would love to engage someone on that conversation for real, because I don't see anywhere in the New Testament where these tribes are being, to where anyone being called back, like in the Old Testament or the New Testament, where when the tribes get gathered, to where they're numbering themselves from their lineage. One more time, I don't see anywhere where they're numbering themselves from the lineage. Like, so when Israel takes a census, you number yourself through the house of your father. So, for instance, in Revelation 7, when 144,000 are being called, I don't see that particular numbering happen like that, to where they were like, yeah, we've been nowhere from this house, whatever. So, like, there's like the angel has a seal to go seal them with. So there's a large discussion that has to happen. But again, going back to this question, like, so Ishmael and Isaac are also going to have the same haplogroup, because they're both Hebrews. They're both going back to Abraham and ultimately Eber, right? So they're going to have the same haplogroup there. So how do you identify them over time? And this becomes even more interesting, because when you think about it, if you're taking the Bible literally, at one point they got to go back to Adam. So how would they have a different haplogroup than Adam? So now we're talking about all kind of different things. And this is one of the things where I think that where the genetic information in the Bible is interesting, where it talks about and this is just me throwing my 2 cents in, where it talks about the seed of the woman and the seed of the father, where that becomes important, I think, is eventually you'll be able to find out how the mixing of the maternal and paternal haplogroups, etc., has something to do with different mutation rates and where you should find different mutations and whatnot, which comes into play when you look at a total genome. And that's what I was saying. When you're talking about something over time, you're probably gonna have to compare a total genome, and you probably have to do such because of such things as Ishmael and Isaac being able to have the same paternal haplogroup, but being of different nations and different tribes, etc. So without further ado, let me get into my questions for Abu, because I thought he had some good questions. I thought that the brothers had already answered the questions before he asked them, to be honest. But just in case that is not the case, I have my own questions in return. And the first question is this: Abu, are you taking into account the tribal lineage versus paternal lineage concept? So again, for instance, you have multiple tribes of Israel. If I want to find out if I'm from the tribe of Levi, if I'm from the tribe of Judah, or from the tribe of Dan, for that instance, how do I find out? How do I narrow that down? Because they're all technically supposed to have the same. If I follow the storyline, they should have the same paternal haplogroup. So I'm going to have to get more specific than just that in order to determine the difference between the 12 tribes. And the Most High said he had a way of sealing the 12 different tribes. That's in Revelation 7, is that there is a way for the 12 to be distinguished and sealed. So I think that's where the brothers are talking about, where the twins are talking about using autosomal DNA to fill in that gap or whatnot. That if you stick just to the mitochondrial and just to the paternal DNA, that you're going to miss out on certain information that could help you fill in those gaps. And I'm going to throw in particularly when you're looking at a whole genome, because if you're just sticking to a mitochondrial DNA in the Y DNA, my God, you're missing out a lot on the genome. A lot on the genome. Second question: how would a woman be able to trace herself back to a patriarch of Israel? So yeah, how would any female be able to trace herself back to any patriarch? And again, this has to go with the concept of I think why the twins are using the concept of paternity testing as an example, because let's say you have a daughter, I have a daughter, the twins have a daughter, someone has a daughter, right? And we want to find out if that's actually our daughter. She doesn't carry the Y haplogroup. She doesn't carry the male haplogroup. So the modern paternity testing doesn't test for the haplogroup like that. They test for stretches of the genetic code that match. And they're specifically like, we don't even test for the whole thing. We just test for what she could have gotten from her father. You know what I'm saying? For instance, there's mutations that you can only get from one side or the other. That becomes something to look at over time. And third question: can only men be Israelites? And I'm asking this sincerely because it's directly implicated by the second question. Can only men be Israelites? And I have to ask this, and again, sincerely, because Garfield also suggested this concept. In the fact that where he was saying that Sister E could not be an Israelite because she couldn't carry the J mark. One presupposing that all Israelites are the J marker, but then secondarily stipulating just because she's a woman, she could not carry the marker. So there's no Israelite women in his concept. There's only Israelite men. So are you saying the same thing, Abu? And again, I'm not being facetious. I'm sincerely asking the question because when you look at what's being said, that would seem to be implicated. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm asking the question so I know what you're actually saying. Question number 4. Why wouldn't the paternity testing methodology presented by the End of the World Ministries answer your question? Because I'm asking that because I didn't see any opposition to what they were saying in any of the posts that you referred me to. So again, I'm making this because I don't know. I'm making this video because I don't know if you caught it or if the argument went unnoticed. So my other set of questions going forward. Let me see if we have any questions in the chat. Question 5. Are people in the Jewish diaspora wrong for connecting to a Jewish identity through autosomal DNA testing? One more time. Are people in the modern Jewish diaspora, no matter what color they are, wrong for connecting to a Jewish identity through an autosomal DNA test? I.e., okay, I am an orphan. I don't know who my parents are. I take a family tree DNA test or a my heritage DNA test, and I find out I have a large percentage of some Jewish population. Let's say it's Ethiopian Jewish. Let's say I'm adopted, and it says Ethiopian Jewish or Sephardic Jewish. For instance, there's a lot of people in the Americas right now coming up with Sephardic Jewish in their DNA, right? Some of which I'm related to. My mother's people being of the sort. My mother's people coming from a population of crypto Jews that was in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, that survived Inquisition, etc., and had been here since the 1500s. Didn't come through Ellis Island. Didn't come through Florida. Came through Mexico. They're finding out they got Jewish DNA. Are they wrong for now identifying as Israel? Because their autosomal DNA test shows that that they're connected to other Jews from around the world. That they have autosomal DNA in common with them. And not other people, but with them. Are they wrong for that? Next question. How would one be able to distinguish the Hebrew haplogroup of Eber from the Israelite haplogroup, the Ishmaelite haplogroup, the Midianite haplogroup, or the Moabite haplogroup, etc.? They have the same paternal line. Now, the Most High says there's a way of doing it. Because the 12 tribes get sealed at one point. The 144,000 get sealed. There's got to be a way of doing it. Again, because otherwise, how do you distinguish between them genetically now? And question 7, how would one be able to distinguish the different tribes of Israel from one another genetically if they have the same paternal line? How could you tell Dan from Levi, Judah, and Ephraim, for example? In the 144,000 being counted, from what I remember, Dan's not there. So how do you make sure Dan's not there? How do you seal the rest of them, but like you don't know who Dan is? How do you keep Dan from sneaking in the bunch? His DNA should look exactly the same otherwise, right? If they got the same haplogroup, if you do it just by haplogroup. To me, the only way you could distinguish is some form of autosomal testing and using the entire genome to do such. That's the way I see it. That's the way I see it. If I'm incorrect, let's talk about the information to that concept. Let's clear it up for the people. But again, as far as I understand, the brothers had already answered the question as to what methodology should be used or why it's viable, why it should be considered viable, before you even put out the hypothetical. But that's just for my knowledge of understanding. Again, Abu, you already know I'm already down to engage you in any conversation because we can have cordial conversation when we do. So with that, family, let me see if I got any questions in the chat. Shout out to the brother Sean Harris. Shout out to the sister Ashley Just Souls. Appreciate y'all for showing up. Sean Harris says, shouldn't there be subclasses? I'm assuming you're talking about when it comes to what I was just talking about with the haplogroups. Yeah, we should be able to differentiate over time. So, for instance, with what I was saying with 23andMe, like when I was young, let me say, like when I was younger, I used to get my father and my uncle confused because they looked a lot alike to me, right? They used to wear a lot of the same clothes, have the same build, same height, same weight, all that type of stuff, right? I could get them confused, right? However, a genetic test would stipulate, no. You and your uncle share 30% of the same DNA. You and your father share 50. I was like, oh, okay. There's a genetic difference there. Even though he's my uncle, he's my father's brother, there's still a big difference. So let's say I'm Judah, right? And my brother is Benjamin, right? You know what I'm saying? People are going to if Judah had a child or whatnot, Judah's child is going to be connected to Benjamin, but more so to Judah. And there's going to be reasons for that, right? There's going to be things that there's a lot of that into play, right? So this is what I'm saying about why we have to open things up, A, to the whole genome, but B, understand how what you would have to look for to determine such overtime. Because it's a field that's new at this juncture in terms of like dealing with the ancient genetics. And again, just as a disclaimer, I'm not saying you throw out haplogroup. I'm saying you deal with all the genetic information on the father's side, all the genetic information on the mother's side, and all the autosomal in between. All the autosomal. Here we go. But yeah, just wanted to make that short and sweet, family. Abu, I appreciate you, brother, man. I know you're gonna answer my questions. I know you don't remember stuff like this, so I appreciate. I say thank you in advance. And again, if there's anything I mischaracterized in terms of your position, let me know. And the same thing goes for Minister Teotw and Minister Yakoba. Shout out to both of the brothers for coming through for the interview. I thought they brought out a lot of interesting information. I thought they did a fantastic job in terms of clarifying their positions on things. And I know I catch flack for this one, but I appreciate Abu for even asking asking questions and asking questions that need to be answered so that they can be answered. Someone asked me earlier, why are we entertaining this? Right? Hold on, let me find the message right quick. Maji said, why do y'all keep entertaining them, right? And this is my argument. Because I dead arguments. There shouldn't be questions out there lingering that aren't getting answered. Because unanswered questions put doubts in people's minds on both sides. And there's no reason to have doubts about this thing. If you believe something is the truth, there's no reason to have doubts about it. You proved the thing. You did the argument. It's that simple. Abu could ask me a million questions. I'm never going to take offense to it. Do I care about why or what? That's not for me to decide. I don't care about that. That's between him and the Most High, right? My thing is this: if there's a good question that's being asked, it should get answered, so that there is no doubt. And that's on either side. That's on either side. But with that, I do hope that Abu answers my questions, because I think it'll get to the heart of the matter. It'll help everyone understand, like, well, did you catch everything that the twins were saying? Because Abu, let me say it like this: if I was the twins, I would feel like you haven't responded to my paternity test concept as an example of what they were saying. So that's just from an outside looking in perspective. If I was them, I would feel like you had not addressed that argument. And me personally, I don't feel like you addressed that argument. Hence this video. But with that, family, I appreciate you for tuning in. Appreciate you for your time. Appreciate you for your comments. Interaction. And with that, family, I say peace and love.
Too many tanks on the ground. Too many tanks. Too many tanks on the ground.
Y'all ain't war machine.
Too many tanks. Too many.
I can tell that you wanna see me lose the control, at the same time losing my soul. Trying to move on the low, but you still can't escape from the view on the scope. If you move, you will go. When the tank's on the ground, better move out the road. Gotta flow like a hookah lounge, who won't smoke? If you choose to provoke, I might loosen the rope enough not to leave a bruise on your throat. The movement's strong, yeah. Strong enough to make a bunch of grown men spray hatred like cologne. We got too much out here going on in the path you traveling, Rocky Sylvester Stallone. But you and I leave it alone. Michael B. Jordan trying to get a creed of your own, just leave me alone. How you gonna talk like a boss? You don't even own the keys to your home. You don't wanna see me in the zone. Blood of a king in my veins, I belong on the throne with a queen of my own. Infatuated by the muscle tone of my body, love squeezing my arm. If we in the war with the other side, why you not taking shots at the other guy? Let me summarize, you advertise black on black crime and antagonize. When I analyze it with my higher mind, I miss my Virgo nature with the fire sign. I can see it clearly through my third eye, point of view higher than the birds fly. No code of honor like the samurai, they just target practice for me bullseye. You a clout chaser working full time and your paradigm is a narrow mind. All the angels in heaven listen when I'm sharing mine. I'm giving back to the culture. I'm in the back of the Rover. Why you at home with your back on the sofa? I'm having a moment. Your childish behavior, I'm sorry, I cannot condone it. The double-edged sword that I'm swinging, sharp enough to cut your bones through your garment. Yeah, Rock Nation signed a deal with the NFL recently, that's a bonus. And I just wanna know what percentage you getting paid off for your performance. Hold up, Jay-Z, he don't even know you. Trademark name who belong to. 6-figure check, no consul. Come to a point where you can't undo what you misconstrue. Every day you attack Jesus, animated like Black Jesus. For that reason, he's still undefeated like Gorilla Hebrew from last season. The war machine running circles around our competition like track season. It's hard for you to be a stand-up guy, cause in the spirit world, your back leaning. I'm sick with it, got me throwing up. PowerPoint ready, they ain't showing up. No information, just inflammation. Amazon book sales going up. But I wouldn't buy it, even if I was on a diet and had a little money on the side. I wouldn't try it, even if my life was on the line and they pointing at my body with the 9. Why should I tell them a whole bunch of lies just for them to join my side? El Shaddai, all praise to the Most High. If the Spirit walking with me, I'm fine. You cannot make a decision. I can see that you afraid of the system. I can tell you have no faith in your vision. You rather sit back and hate on religion. I bet you won't walk in the government building and tell them that you want an interview. Tell them that your name is Nimrod and you demand justice and call them a criminal. Burn up their literature right there in front of them. I guarantee you gon' make the news. At least you be finally famous. Look at the camera like, mama, I made it. Have you ever stood in front of the very personification of hatred? I have on many occasions. The devil got multiple faces. Look at the swing of the pendulum. Look at the shape of the pentagon. I walk in the power of Pentecost. I show up and mess with your pentagram. Tanks on the ground, man.
Too many tanks on the ground. Too many.